Hi GPers, this is December 23rd, 1988, and I want to read you an excerpt from Austin Briggs' master course for the Famous Artist course. This is a general chat about the profession of illustration. It would give me tremendous pleasure if I could tell you in a few simple words how you could become a success as an illustrator. Unfortunately, I can't. No one can. It's no easy road, and there's no final end to the hard road. The more one is able to accomplish, the more successful one becomes, the greater and more distant the final goal appears to be. I paint about 45 pictures a year, and these appear in leading national magazines. Out of this group, there are usually only 2 or 3 that I really like. 7 or 8 are likely to be pretty bad, and the rest are fair. I've been at this job now a great many years. Day after day, week after week, I go to my studio and do the best work I can. I try to approach every painting with a fresh enthusiasm, a determination to learn what the job can teach me. Over the years, I have discovered what every artist must realize if he's going to continue trying to become a better artist. That lesson is that one must be eternally patient. The only way to learn is to paint. There is only one way to become an illustrator, and that way is to work from morning till night, observing, sketching, imagining, painting. It may be necessary to paint hundreds of pictures and make even more hundreds of drawings before you can climb very far in this tough competitive business of illustration. But if you have talent, if you really want to be a success, if you believe that you will be a success, and if you're willing to pay the price of success in hard work, disappointment, heartbreak, and just sheer emotional and physical exhaustion, the time will undoubtedly come when you can say, "This is it, I'm one of the boys." And just about at that time, you begin to realize that there are still many problems that you haven't licked yet. But by then, you'll know that you've got the stamina and experience to reach the next goal on the way. Illustration should be fun. Perhaps there's one secret of success in becoming an illustrator after all, and that secret is to have fun doing it. Illustration is a full-time career. Unless you get genuine pleasure and enjoyment out of making illustrations, your chance of success and happiness are pretty small. The good illustrators I know are good because they'd rather be drawing than anything else in the world. If you can think of any activity that would be more fun in the long run than being an illustrator, I'd advise you to do that. The point is, a successful illustrator has to work so much of the time that is at his job that there just isn't much time left over to enjoy many things that aren't somehow connected with illustration. An illustrator has to get his biggest kicks out of his work. Furthermore, you've got to enjoy your job because your attitude is bound to show up in your work. You can't make an illustration with a desperate do-or-die approach and expect it to be anything but a strained, artificial, and cold work. A most important ingredient in a good illustration is the excitement and the pleasure that the artist had in making it. The picture itself will tell the observer in some indescribable way whether it was the happy child of pleasure or the product of forced determination. Not that every picture can be fun, far from it. And there are very few pictures that can be created without a few moments or a few hours of uncertainty and questioning. But in every picture, even if it is not entirely successful, there should be touches that seem to say, "This was a terrific lot of fun to do." If there are enough of these, the painting may succeed in spite of its weaknesses. Illustration can be fun if every picture is a new adventure. The artist must always approach his subject with a fresh viewpoint and the conviction that his subject will show him things that he has never seen before. Every illustration is a new opportunity. It is one more chance to say things more clearly, to overcome old limitations, to make a masterpiece. It's always a temptation, of course, to try and discover an easy formula that has wide appeal and then write it for all it's worth. Some artists have done this, and year after year they paint variations on a basic theme until it becomes hard to tell one painting from another. That kind of thing can get to be awfully boring, both for the artist and for his public. Personally, I have tried to avoid getting tied up in a formula. I don't worry too much about whether my new picture looks very much like the one I painted 2 weeks ago, provided the new one is an honest expression of how I feel about the subject. Illustration is my greatest pleasure because I look upon every picture as a chance to try a new approach and as an opportunity to make further progress in mastering technical weaknesses. Every artist has technical limitations. Learn to face your limitations and determine to overcome them. When composing, you must assume that you have the technical ability to express the idea, even though you know that you may not be entirely successful. If you have an idea to express, you will find the means to do it. Artists have always developed a technique as a matter of necessity. They learned to draw and they mastered painting skills because they had so much desire to make their ideas clear. Don't stifle your creative imagination by holding it back to the limits of your ability to draw or paint. Remember that what you have to say is much more important than the way you say it. No amount of technical skill will mean anything, one way or the other, if you haven't got an idea or emotion to express in the first place. Concentrate on discovering and organizing the idea. As time goes on, your technique will improve in direct proportion to the demands you make upon it. This does not mean that you should ignore your weaknesses. Recognize what they are and give them special attention. If you can't draw well, for instance, concentrate on drawing until you know you can draw anything. If your sense of value relationships is uncertain, work on values until you have that problem licked. If your sense of color needs development, experiment with color until you are sure that you can do what you want with it. But never let one technical weakness limit your approach to the basic idea. If you try to escape the things that are difficult for you, you'll never master them. Half the pleasure in illustration is the reward that comes from doing the impossible. Every painting is a chance to make oneself a better artist and to have fun doing it. On becoming a person as well as an artist. If we admit that art is expression, it's obvious that unless there is someone and something to express, there is no art. Many hopeful illustrators have a thoroughly adequate technique, but they have nothing to say. They lack the originality which can come only from personal experience of nature and people. The value of an illustration lies in the first-hand testimony about things and people. This is the way the artist looked upon the world around him, and he saw it as no other individual has ever seen it. Part of his own intense surprise, excitement, and pleasure has been captured by his brush, and it gets across to other people who see the painting. As an artist, you must evolve your own feeling for things and people, your own method of working, your own affection for certain painting materials, and your own way of handling them. Every picture you paint should draw on all your resources as a person. It should be an expression of the sum total of your experiences. It should reveal how you feel about the things you have seen and heard and done. The secret of becoming an artist is only partly the process of learning a technique. The more important thing is to learn to react. An artist is a person who reacts to even the smallest things that happen around him. He observes everything as exactly as possible. He absorbs it and makes it part of him. And because it is part of him, he is able to recreate it in his own terms. Our bodies are nourished by the food that we eat. Our personalities are developed by all the experiences that are brought into us by our 5 senses. Becoming an artist is a matter of being alert, and alive to every possible sensation and experience, and then relating these different sensations and experiences in a way that makes sense. There are some artists who are either unwilling to trust their own reactions to life, or too lazy or insensitive to become unique individuals. Such artists, since they want to make a financial success of their craft, are willing to take someone else's point of view about things and present them as their own. They become imitators of other more imaginative and more sensitive artists. I personally cannot imagine anything more frustrating than the life of an imitator. An imitator can never do anything the originator did not do first. He can't even paint a tree. If he has... excuse me. He can't even paint a tree if he has not seen how the originator did it. When the vogue for the originator is over, or when the originator stops painting, the imitator is finished too. Imitation is the blindest of all blind alleys, and the most destructive habit a beginning artist can possibly get into, I know. I can speak from experience, because when I was an immature artist, I imitated like mad. Eventually, I discovered that this kind of thing just doesn't pay in the end. It means that the imitator must lead a second-hand life, always seeing things through some other artist's eyes. He never gives himself a chance to do a picture that will stimulate anyone else because he hasn't been stimulated himself. I discovered that the only way to paint is to go to life and reality for material, and to express the excitement and emotion you feel as directly as you can in your own way. Curiously enough, the minute I began painting things the way I saw them, I stopped worrying about the question of developing a style, quote-unquote. As a matter of fact, I tried to avoid developing a special manner. I have no set approach to composition, no set types, no carefully formulated color scheme. I positively try to avoid mannerisms of brushstroke or technique, and yet, in spite of all this, I am told that I have a style. It is only reasonable that I should have, because the pictures I make are made by me. They reveal more or less consistent choices based on an ever-growing set of reactions and preferences. They reflect my personal taste, my own affections and dislikes. If I have a style, it's not a deliberate, conscious attempt to exploit a group of popular cliches. It's rather an unconscious projection of my personality into paint. Style is never created out of whole cloth. Style is a natural and inevitable reflection of personality. Style is the direct expression of what you are. It is as intimate a matter as your manner of speech, the way you walk, the way you sign your name. Everyone inevitably has a style of his own. Excuse me. If he is trying honestly to express what he feels without trying to imitate someone else. Therefore, forget about the question of style. Instead, concentrate on becoming a person. Learn to react, to feel, to love, to want, to dislike, and style will take care of itself. Let the experiences of life make their mark upon you, and these marks will show up in your painting. Your reward will be far greater than you can now imagine, because you will have far more than a style. You will have become a unique personality, and that, after all, is perhaps the chief end of living. Well, that's really inspiring material. Fantastic. That's later on in the famous artist course that he teaches. He starts out talking about how illustration is a job. He kind of hits at professionalism as well as the kind of more high-minded ideals that he hits on there. He says, here's some highlights from this earlier discussion. The illustrator is a day laborer among the artists. He works hard like a one-man ditch digger, and he works alone. His paintings are made to order. He must comply with certain definite, predetermined restrictions. He must maintain definite standards and always come up with a fresh, original, and imaginative viewpoint. He's only as good as his last illustration. He must meet deadlines. If not, both he and his client will become dead ducks. But despite the fact that the illustrator is a commercial artist, this does not mean that he must be limited to the lowest requirements of his craft. The fact that he works within rigid technical restrictions and other limitations doesn't mean that he cannot create noteworthy pictures. After all, the great masters of the past were subject to restrictions, in many ways as rigid as those of the modern commercial artist. If the modern illustrator is a good artist, he'll make good pictures. All his life, the illustrator will be discovering new methods of working. The more he knows, the more he'll be able to learn. His pictures will be exciting and successful only to the degree that he has learned to see, to react, and to express what he observes and feels. To this end, the degree to which an illustrator can communicate emotion is the yardstick by which he is measured. Now here he gets at some discussion of the illustrator and his subject matter. I'm paraphrasing all the way along here, of course. But he says that an artist should not attempt to paint just what he sees, but to put down what he feels in concrete visual terms. The external world, Briggs says, is merely a shell under which reality hides, and it's that reality that the artist attempts to show. Seems to be related to some of the Swedenborgian ideas of Pyle and Innes. There are a great many artists and a great many people who think that art is primarily an attempt to represent nature. Actually, art begins at the place where nature departs from an attempt to imitate nature. Nature provides the raw material, which the artist shapes and forms into a coherent visual statement. What's valuable, he says, in an artist's point of view is the personal rhythm and emotion that comes through in making those subjective choices to limit reality. Okay, I want to just reread a passage that I read on another tape because it's such a great quote. This is the quote from Henry James about experience. It is excellent and inconclusive to say that we must write from experience. What kind of experience is intended, and where does it begin and end? Experience is never limited, and it is never complete. It is an immense sensibility, a kind of huge spiderweb of the finest silken threads, suspended in the chamber of consciousness and catching every airborne particle in its tissue. I love that, man. It's such a great image. It's the very atmosphere of the mind, and when the mind is imaginative, much more when it happens to be that of a man of genius, it takes to itself the faintest hints of life. It converts the very pulses of air into revelations. The power to guess the unseen from the seen, to trace the implications of things, to judge the whole piece by the pattern, the condition of feeling life in general so completely that you are well on your way to knowing any corner of it. This cluster of gifts may almost be said to constitute experience, and they occur in country and in town, and in the most differing stages of education. If experience consists of impressions, it may be said that impressions are experience, just as they are the very air we breathe. Therefore, I should certainly say to a novice, write from experience only. I should feel that this was a rather tantalizing monition, if I were not careful immediately to add, try to be one of the people on whom nothing is lost. The part where he talks about the power to guess the unseen from the seen reminds me of Pyle. I've always been amazed at his ability to completely call up the full texture of life in the Middle Ages, not even having been to England in his lifetime. How was it? If you read his stories of the Middle Ages and see his illustrations, his imagination is so absolutely vivid that this quote must be true. He must have been able to absorb impressions from the world around him in Wilmington, and to be able to translate and convert those into the rugged, dark days of the Middle Ages, and it must have been so vivid in his imagination that he could just translate it onto canvas. Just a genius. Well, that's the bell, and that's the end of this side of the tape.